pinnacle of human perfection.
Welcome to Unbiased and on the Fence. I'm Shane. I'm so glad you could join me. Well, I got a good one for you. This is another Law of One installment focused on the whole space-time, time-space topic. And we're really just going to focus on one of Ra's answers instead of a whole session because this one answer Ra gives is so profound. And you know, the whole service to self, service to others thing, just to get a quick example of how it's sort of all interconnected. Back when I was doing the Golden Child Mandela effect, I was rendering out the video and I got the strong impulse to add this little section into it. And you know, anybody who does video work, you know, once you're rendering, you don't want to have to go back and re-render, but the impulse was so strong that I went out and finished rendering it, recorded the new little section, added it in there, and had to re-render the whole thing. It was a real big deal, but just to show how the service to others turned around into service to self. That part resonated with a few different people, but one person in particular, Scott Balow, it spoke to him. And you know, today I'm doing this whole Law of One thing, and he sends me this link to this video where the guy kind of draws out this little diagram, and it went right along with what I was already doing so well that it made me realize this whole nature of us helping each other, and how the service to others turned around and yielded a reward for me today, which in turn yields another reward for you all, because now I've got this diagram that I can use along with the whole Law of One material. So I will actually leave the link he sent me was to a video called The Mind Matrix Explained So Well, Vital Information for Freedom, and it was put out by a guy named John Homewood. The link is below in the description if you want to check that out. It is a cool video. It's not very long. Well, maybe 30 minutes or something, but you know, YouTubers, you know how that is. They could be hours. So here is the image. Now it varies a little bit from the way that John did it in his video, but I wanted to sort of separate it because of the way the Law of One material that I'm going over separates things into time space and space time. Now here, the life we live, we're in space time. We're in space, but we're locked into time because, you know, time goes 1 minute by 1 minute, you know, can't really move forward or backwards in time. And then time space is locked into space, but they can move around time freely in the same sort of the opposite way that we can with space-time. And this is important to realize because the connection point between our higher power, our higher self, and our self is in the now. So this starts to really make sense at why you need to be in the moment, why you need to pay attention in the now, because how can you get a synchronicity in the past or the future? I mean, you might get one in the future, but you won't get it until you're in the now of the future. You see what I mean? And so this is why it's so important to be in the now, to pay attention to what's going on right now. And this is also, I sort of had this little epiphany. I was thinking about how human emotions kind of run amok sometimes. And it made me realize how, you know, hurts and angers are us dwelling on the past. Also got this with the John Homewood video, but certainly things can hurt us in the moment and cause anger in the moment. But most of the time we're dwelling on things in the past that cause the anger that we're feeling in the moment and the pain that we're feeling in the moment. Then that caused me to think about the future, and I realized, oh my goodness, the whole fear and uncertainty that we have to deal with comes from sort of anticipation of the future. I mean, certainly we have fear and uncertainty in the moment at times, but most of it is thinking about what's going to happen and not being sure and uncertainty. So you can see how easy it is to drop all this emotional baggage, or at least most of it, if you just stay in the now. Um, and that also causes this connection to be stronger with your higher power, your higher self. So just to do a quick summary over the Law of One material I'm going to go over, because it explains time, space, and space-time, and how we live out our life in space-time. And then after we live our life, we go to time-space, where we review our life, and we can move about, and there's no set time limit. You know, you can be up there for hundreds of years going over your life, and it really kind of made me realize the whole concept of hell. You're not really burning forever, but you're learning for quite a bit of time, because while you're up here, you start reviewing. Like the example I just did, I would, if I hadn't have acted to add that piece of video in there, I would have saw how I didn't affect um, Scott Balow in a way I did, for him to turn around and send me the link. And you know, some of you all might not have gotten this whole concept without this little diagram here, and I certainly wouldn't have understood it as well, because I'm a visual learner myself. And that's just one little example. And you might have to review how you treated someone, and you know, the actions it led to them to do because of how you treated them, and so much. But um, this whole area up here is sort of what we would consider like I guess the afterlife, or where our higher power is right now, and where the synchronicities come from, and where the impulses come from. And this is the tangible world we live in, and this is sort of a more of a untangible, intangible world. But they have a much broader view of everything from up here, sort of seeing into the future and seeing the past, and having just a much broader view of everything, where we're sort of locked into the moment. And when we dwell on the past or the future from this perspective, and instead of going up here and trusting our divine higher power that it has this perfect view of the past and the future, and we sort of try to do it from down here, we're trying to use, back to that right left brain thing, we're trying to use our left brain to sort of figure things out from this limited view down here, instead of being in the moment and trusting that our higher power, that has the much broader view of the past and the future and how everything's connected. And so yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. I'll come back to this image um, later on, but let's get right into the raw material. Let's see here. And I will sort of translate just a little bit, just so you all don't have to follow along. So I might swap out some words for something that will be a little bit better understood right now. Get this down. Let's see. Okay, as an entity goes through the death process in third density and finds itself in time-space. Now keep in mind the time is the afterlife, and the one that starts with space is where we're at right now. So you find yourself in the afterlife in time-space. It finds itself in a different set of circumstances. Would you please describe the properties or circumstances of time-space, and then the process of healing of incarnative experiences that some entities encounter? Okay, I am Ra. Although this query is difficult to answer adequately due to the limitations of our vocabulary, they'll do the best they can. So the hallmark of time-space, or the afterlife, is the inequity, or the bias, I should say, between time and space. In your space-time, the spatial orientation of material causes a tangible framework for illusion. In time-space, the inequity, or the bias, is upon the shoulders of that property we know as time. Now, this property renders entities and experiences intangible in a relative sense. In your framework, each particle or core vibration moves at a velocity which approaches what you would call the speed of light from the direction of superluminal velocities. So this is basically just speaking to how we can interact, we can touch things. We've got, sort of this illusion of this physical universe that we're in. But in the time space or the metaphysical experience is that which is a very finely tuned and although an analog of space time, because it's directly connected to the world we live in, it's lacking in its tangible characteristics. In these metaphysical planes, there is a great deal of what you call time, which is used to review and re-review the biases and learned teachings of a prior, as you would call it, space-time incarnation. So basically, you got all the time in the world to review the life you lived and just sort of go backwards and forwards, and you're not confined to time there, so you can review your whole life backwards and forwards. The extreme fluidity of these regions makes it possible for much to be penetrated, which must needs be absorbed before the process of healing for an entity may be accomplished. Each entity is located in a somewhat immobile state, much as you are located in space-time in a somewhat immobile state in time. In this immobile space, the entity has been placed by the form maker and higher self so that it may be in proper configuration for learned teaching, that which is received in the space-time incarnation. So this is basically saying the way we are locked into time, they're locked into space, but not locked into time the way we're not locked into space. We can move about. They can move about time in the way we can move about space. So that allows you to really go over your life and and really have a deep view and understanding of your life, to learn from the mistakes and things from the life we lived, basically. See, I'm scrolling off the screen. Hang on a second here. Okay, there we go. Depending upon this time-space locus, there will be certain helpers which assist in this healing process. The process involves seeing in full the experience, seeing it against the backdrop of the mind-body-spirit complex total experience, forgiving the self for all missteps as regards the missed guidepost during the incarnation, and finally the careful assessment of the next necessities for learning. This is done entirely by the higher self until an entity has become conscious in space-time of the process and means of spiritual evolution, at which time the entity will consciously take part in all decisions. Now, I didn't, one of the reasons it's taken me so long to come out with this video is I've been going along this stuff over and over again, and I keep getting stuff time and time again with it, and I didn't get this to the very last one, and it was because of that picture that this last section here, it's because of the picture, that diagram I made, I was able to grasp what it's actually saying there, and it is pretty profound, you guys. Okay, so let me go over this again. So depending on the time space, we'll have helpers that go over and point out things to us, and it's against the backdrop of our just total life here on Earth, basically. And I'm sure there'll be, like, weeping and gnashing of teeth, because we'll see, the pain we caused people, and there'll be a process of having to forgive ourselves, and there'll be a process of seeing the missed opportunities we had to help people, and just to do a better job at what we could have done. We'll see the missed guideposts, and yeah, I can imagine this is probably going to be a pretty intensive process, going through these mistakes you made, And then once you go through all the mistakes, then you decide what can be done in your next incarnation to help you learn the things you weren't able to learn in this incarnation or the life we're living right now. So that got to this last section here, which puzzled me for a while, because it says this is done entirely, by the higher self until an entity has become conscious in space-time of the process and means of spiritual evolution, at which time the entity will consciously take part in all decisions. Now, this is what I think this is actually meaning, this last little section here. And this is what's so profound about it, is that it's talking first about us dying and having to go and sort of review our life, right? We go up and we can view everything from this broad view here. We can see the mistakes we made. But this can happen while we're down here, before we die. And I believe that's what it's saying there. It's really the only thing that makes sense once you look at this. Because this is all set up by your higher self, right? But then it says, until an entity has become conscious in space-time. That's while we're down here, of the process and means of spiritual evolution. So while we're down here, we can become conscious of the choices we're making, and we can begin the process while we're here. And this is sort of the moment of enlightenment for us. And I believe I've actually reached this point where I'm beginning to sort of not miss those guideposts and to start working on being a better person right now. And that was sort of, I guess, part of the distortion of Christianity, is because you sort of are taught that Jesus did it all for you, and that, it's all been done, and you're forgiven, and of course you try to be a better person and stuff. But it's not really until you get out of that distortion that you begin to really see this deeper understanding. And this really ties you in with other people, because now I'm consciously taking part in all decisions while I'm in space-time. So hopefully that makes sense. But back to the drawing here. We've got sort of like on calm, basically in the moment. We've got this helper up here that can tell us, that can guide us, but we have to be in the moment. If you're dwelling on the things of the past, you're not here in the moment to hear and to see the guideposts and the signs, and to feel those impulses of what you should be doing in the now, right? And if you're worried about the future, you're not here in the now, trusting that your connection up here that sees the future has got you covered. So just to look at the space-time and time-space thing from just this one question, really, I don't know, I felt like I was really enlightened quite a bit on just this one topic, and it was pretty awesome, because I went over it several times, probably about a dozen times, and each time I kept sort of understanding it a little bit more. And then when I realized that last section, so this is talking about when we're actually, living our life and stuff, and it was, I don't know, sort of like a moment of insight for me. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you on the next one. Have a great one.